It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 632 of Rico Brogna. This is our final Rico rewatchable of the year. It is amazing to think that it has been 25 years since we were viciously attacked on September 11th. And then obviously, about a week and a half later, the Mets returned to New York, played a baseball game against the Atlanta Braves, and Mike Piazza had a home run that I think for most, not just Met fans, but for New Yorkers, for baseball fans, feels like the most important home run ever. May not be in terms of a pennant race, may not be in terms of what was on the line, but it was a surreal night that Friday night in Queens. You had 40,000 people at Shea Stadium, not knowing what to do. Are we allowed to cheer? How do we feel? And obviously, Mike had that epic moment, the home run off of Steve Carsey. So we thought, with it being 25 years, let's rewatch the game. For many people in the Rico audience, depending on your age, this may be a game you've never seen. If you are, I'd say like 35 or younger, and we've had a lot of interactions with kids who listen to the Rico Brogna, new Met fans, this is history. This is something you've heard about. Maybe your dad or mom told you about, but maybe you didn't experience it. So for those under the age of 35, maybe a little bit younger, this was not a rewatchable. This was a first-time watchable, a chance to see the entirety of a baseball game and everything around it, from the pregame ceremonies, the postgame interviews, what was said during the broadcast. So I thought that was a really good experience. And for those that have seen it, you saw the game, this is probably the first time you've seen it in 25 years. Personal story, and all of us have our personal stories, especially around that horrible day of 9/11. For me, I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. I had just moved down there about 3 months earlier. And I remember a couple of vivid things about the day, 9/11, and then obviously September 21st, 10 days later when they played this game. I remember waking up to the radio, and I can't recall what show it was. Like, a part of me wants to say it was Tony Kornheiser, but I don't think it was. I think Tony may have called in to the show I was listening to down in Washington, D.C., and they were talking at the time about an accident. That's how I had took it, that there was an accident of a plane going into the Twin Towers. And I remember waking up and going about my day. I was working at XM Radio at the time, and I was taking classes. I was trying to get a college degree while working, and I was taking like one class in the semester. And I put my head down, and I'm like, I am going to this class. And while I was driving to this school, I'm trying to remember the school I went to, Montgomery College, so it was in Maryland, I heard on the radio about the second plane. And immediately, I thought it, you thought it, I think we all thought it. We knew this was no longer an accident. And for whatever reason, I still felt like I needed to go to this class. All the while, I'm trying to call my parents who live back in New York. Could not get through. And I'm sure that's a memory a lot of us have, that you couldn't speak to anybody. You couldn't call anybody. All the phone lines were down. And in an era before text messaging and whatnot, this was the only way to communicate. And that was very scary, because while my dad didn't work in the trade center, he'd go to the city a lot. Like, I have no idea. So that was very stressful. But again, still wanted to go to that class. And the thing that I remember from that class, and this makes me cry every time I talk about it, so I'm going to try not to, is the teacher, the professor, was this older woman. And she's trying to start the class. And then she says, look, I just got to say something. I've been around a long time. I've seen it all. I was marching back in the 60s for civil rights. I remember World War II. Like, she's going through all the things she experienced as an American citizen. And then she started crying and said, but never this. And that's, I think, the moment as a naive 18-year-old where it really hit me what was happening. You're obviously in the moment very scared and nervous and angry, but it's tough to really put it into your mind what was actually happening. And her saying that was like the moment of, oh, crap, like, this is real. And, we all have our experiences from that day, whether it's waking up, whether it's being in school and getting the news that way. But it was obviously a horrible day. It's still one of the worst days we've all experienced as Americans. And so 10 days later, when baseball was returning to New York, the Mets had played a few games prior to that against the Pittsburgh Pirates in Pittsburgh. And that Friday night, as the Mets were playing Atlanta, I was getting on an Amtrak train to come back to New York. My first trip home, see my parents. Was even thinking of going to Ground Zero just to help any way I can. Not that I could do much, but, it's that hopeless feeling of I got to do something. And the train I took was during this game. So this is one of those Met games. I was not there. You know, if you read my Mets Bible, I was at like every game, not this one. And I didn't even get a chance to score it. So as we did this Rico rewatchable, this was my chance to score the game 25 years later. But I was on Amtrak listening to Bob Murphy and Gary Cohen call the game on, I'd like to call it a transistor radio, but it was just a regular old Walkman back in 2001. So my experience about this game was listening to it. And so a little bit later on here in the Rico, you'll hear the Bob Murphy home run call. That's the call I heard while driving up an Amtrak with static all over the place. So this was very interesting for me to get to watch this game, everything about it, the tone, the conversations, hearing young Howie Rose, hearing Fran Healy, hearing Ralph Kiner, watching the pregame ceremonies, and then trying to relive the emotions of the game. Because the other thing about this game and the weekend that followed, because I did go to Saturday's game and I went to Sunday's game against Atlanta, was that we were in a pennant race. Like, we were battling back. 2001 was this odd Mets season. We sucked. We were under 500 in April, under 500 in May, under 500 in June, to the point where the Mets were making trades at the trade deadline that felt like sell-offs. They traded Rick Reed to the Minnesota Twins for Matt Lawton, who would be the leadoff hitter in this game. The Mets would trade Dennis Cook and Turk Wendell to the Phillies, a division rival, for Bruce Chen, who would be the starter in this game. So it wasn't completely rebuilding moves because they weren't getting minor league prospects back. They were getting guys who were on the major league team, but they certainly felt like the Mets were changing things from the team that had won the pennant in 2000 and were making these moves more with an eye towards the future than 2001. But they started going on a run. And maybe one of the biggest misnomers is that the Met run began prior to 9/11. In this broadcast, you would hear, and you'd hear it in the postgame interview with Mike Piazza, which we will play later, where, hey, it feels like there's a lot of magic going on. It feels like, you know, the Mets can do it for the city. And there was some magic going on in terms of the way they were playing, but the winning streak began before baseball shut down after 9/11. And so here we are as Met fans, the year after winning the pennant, the year after losing Mike Hampton in free agency, not getting A-Rod, all that kind of stuff. Here we are as the little engine that could, battling back. And so as we go into this game on Friday, September 21st, the Mets are 5.5 games out. They're in the race. They're 5.5 games out, and they've got 6 games left with the Atlanta Braves, a real chance to get back into it. So the backdrop is yes, the Mets are in a pennant race, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is this is going to be weird. This is going to be odd. We got attacked 10 days ago. We were unsure if it's time yet to play baseball in New York. Are we allowed to smile? Are we allowed to laugh? Are we allowed to cheer? It was a very uneasy feeling. And so the first clip I want to play, because I pulled a few clips from this Rico rewatchable. So if you didn't watch the game, you can certainly have the emotions with us. I want to play the beginning of the ceremony. And the ceremony got me tearing up when I watched it last night because I really didn't remember it. Like, I remember aspects of it. Like the Braves and the Mets shook each other's hands after the ceremony and hugged each other. I remember that. But watching the whole thing, listening to the whole thing, you felt like it was 25 years ago, man. You felt like the raw emotions of how we all felt in the weeks and months following that brutal attack. So here is the PA announcer at Shea Stadium setting up the festivities prior to Mets Braves.
Come together for the first regular season professional sporting event in New York City since Tuesday, September 11th. We return to our national pastime, in part to show that America can and will go on. But before we begin our game, we will pause to remember the victims of those terrible attacks, their families, and the thousands of rescue workers, volunteers, and Good Samaritans who have shown that America can be at her best in the most difficult of times. Our colors tonight are being presented by a joint color guard consisting of New York's Police Department, Fire Department, Emergency Medical Service, Port Authority Police, and the New York State Port Officers Association, 5 agencies that lost rescue personnel when the World Trade Center towers collapsed.
You could hear the roar of the crowd when the agencies were announced. Surreal hearing it. And then the ceremonies were incredible. They had the bagpipes playing, and you saw every Met and every Brave reacting emotionally to it. The fact that it was the Braves in a lot of ways was perfect because we hate them, right? This is the height of Mets Braves, the height of just that rivalry. And the guys on the field, we despise them. But in this moment, we realized we don't really despise them. Like we don't like Chipper Jones, but it's the toy store dislike of Chipper Jones. We don't like Brian Jordan, and certainly he'd haunt us over the next 2 weeks with some of the big moments he had, but we don't really dislike Brian Jordan. So it was almost perfect that the team they were playing was the team that reminded us, as much as we don't like them, as I use the air quotes, it's baseball, and they're our friendly team that we dislike. Here is when the 2001 Mets were announced on the field, and you'll hear Howie Rose talk glowingly about America's mayor, because that's the way it felt back then, Rudolph Giuliani.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the 2001 New York Mets.
Well, Mayor Giuliani once again receiving such warm support from everyone, not only here in the ballpark, but I think around the rest of the nation, Ralph, because really the mayor of New York City, the mayor of Los Angeles, maybe Chicago, have always been, to an extent, national figures, but never more so, I don't think, than in the wake of this tragedy. And what Rudy Giuliani has done to help begin the healing process has been nothing short of heroic.
Yep. No doubt about it. That's how we all felt. And Rudy Giuliani got a standing ovation at this game, which would be the first and last time because he's a Yankee fan. It wasn't even just, we boo the mayor, which we do, and we've been doing it for a long, long time. It was, that guy is an open Yankee fan. But he was there, and he was a part of all the dignitaries that were out there. I thought Ralph Kiner and Howie Rose, as this game was about to begin, did a really good job of trying to explain what I was getting into at the top of this pod, which is, this is a pennant race game. The Mets are in it. The Mets are trying to pull off this incredible comeback. They were 13 and a half games back in late August, and here they are. They're 5.5 out. They're playing really good baseball. And more than that, they've got head-to-head games with Atlanta. The Phillies are ahead too, so you had to worry about them, but the Braves were the team. They were the team that would win the division every single season, and they felt vulnerable. And it felt as if the combination of the Mets, the way the Mets were playing, the fact that all this emotion was on their side, hey, could the Mets pull off this incredible all-time comeback? Here's Ralph Kiner and Howie Rose kind of setting up the oddity that, hey, this is an important baseball game. Let's keep that in mind. With all the emotion attached to it, there's a lot on the line in this game.
Getting back right now to what is at hand, it's the most important game the New York Mets have to play in this season.
Well, the crowd seems pretty well prepared for baseball. I'm not sure that mentally everyone here might have felt that way even Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday watching. But right now the Mets start play just 5.5 games out of first place. And so Bobby Cox, the manager of the Atlanta Braves, presents this starting lineup. It's brought to you by Bud.
By the way, how cool, did you hear that sound, that old Fox Sports New York sound? It's been a while since we had FSNY as the broadcast of the New York Mets with Howie and Ralph and Fran Healy, and they had numerous other guys. But you hear those old sound effects, and that does bring back memories. Here was that lineup he was talking about with the Atlanta Braves. A lot of interesting names. Rookie Marcus Giles led off at second base. Julio Franco, who would go on and play for the Mets again, batting second at first base. How about this with Chipper Jones? Left field. This was a moment in time in which Atlanta had moved Chipper from third base to left field. Brian Jordan batting cleanup and right. Ken Caminetti, the late Ken Caminetti, who would make an incredible defensive play in this game, batting fifth at third base. Andrew Jones, the new Hall of Famer in center field. Javier Lopez catching, which shows you that Greg Maddux wasn't pitching. Ray Sanchez, who would also go on and be a future Met, shortstop batting eighth. And Jason Marquis, a New Yorker, a Staten Islander. How about that aspect of it? On this emotional game, we would have a New Yorker, a young New Yorker at the time. Jason Marquis was still, a young player making the start for Atlanta. That was your Atlanta lineup. And they were facing Bruce Chen. Bruce Chen is sort of a forgettable Met in history. Like when you say his name, if you say Evan, Bruce Chen, what do you think of? I honestly don't think of him starting this game, and maybe we should, because he went out and threw a hell of a game. I mean, he threw one of the best games of his major league career. 7 innings, 6 hits, 1 run. It was unearned on an error by Mike Piazza. We'll get into that later. And only walked 1 guy. And never a mention of his pitch count. As he was going through this game, same with Marquis, we never heard what their pitch count was. I think there may have been one brief mention of Jason Marquis. But when I think of Bruce Chen, I think of being traded for Dennis Cook and Turk Wendell. That's all I think of. And then bouncing around the major leagues for a long time. He was with Atlanta. He was with Montreal. He was with the Mets. He was with, I think he ended up with Philadelphia or was with Philadelphia at some point, with Kansas City. Bruce Chen ended up bouncing around baseball until 2015. So, look, credit to him. He's certainly not a Hall of Famer, not a star, anything like that. But he put together a decade and a half at the major league level. And this was a hell of a start. He pitched a great game. He walked the first batter he faced, which was annoying. And then Julio Franco lined out into a double play, which could have been worse. It looked off the bat like it was going to be a base hit to right field, and Atlanta was going to have 2 on and nobody out. But instead, it was picked off by Todd Zeal at first base, turned it into a double play, and then Chipper Jones struck out. He pitched really well. The only run he gave up, and this was the first run of the game, came in the 4th inning. Chipper Jones had a little infield hit on a play that Ray Ordonez, probably should have made. And then Ken Caminiti hit one down the right field line, bounced it into no man's land, and Matt Lawton got over to it, made the throw to Edgardo Alfonso, and Alfonso's relay throw to the plate to nail Chipper Jones was going to get him by a mile. It was bounced, but it was right in Mike's glove, and he flat out missed it. We talk about Mike Piazza and his offense in this game, which we will definitely get to, but Mike, you got to make that freaking play. And here's what I'm surprised about, because this is one of those games, like I mentioned, that maybe you saw it, maybe you're watching it for the first time. In my case, I listened to it on the radio. I don't remember that they called that an error. So I'm watching this game, and I'm scoring it, first time scoring it. And I'm like, they really should give Mike Piazza an error. They never mention it on the broadcast, but in the next half inning, you see the Mets have an error. So based on that, I'm like, wow, I think they got it right. Because that was a play. I love you, Mike. And this whole Rico a lot of it is about you and your heroics. Got to make that play. One other discussion during this game, and obviously there's a lot of discussion, a lot of how you can donate, how you can help. Rudy Giuliani popped on the broadcast, was Howie Rose explaining the hats controversy. And I forgot all about it till Howie brought it up. So you watch this game, and maybe your memories of the post 9/11 Mets is that they all wore hats honoring the agencies in New York City, NYPD, FDNY, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, it's a tradition that the Mets still uphold when they play games on 9/11. We've seen this before. We've seen this as recently as a year ago. So they wore it in the first game back against the Pirates. And apparently Major League Baseball was like, nah, you can't do that. We have a uniform policy. Here is Howie Rose on the broadcast explaining that policy and how the New York Mets were going to be defiant against it.
The Mets would like to continue to wear these caps for the rest of the season. Now, Major League Baseball mandates that uniforms and all caps and accessories conform to strict requirements. And so they've needed to receive special permission to wear these caps, permission that we are told is scheduled to be discontinued after tonight. But there are some defiant people in that Mets dugout who say that no matter what Major League Baseball or MLB properties might say, they want to wear those caps for the remainder of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what results.
What resulted was Bobby Valentine and the New York Mets telling Bud Selig very kindly to go F themselves, is essentially what happened. And they ended up wearing for the rest of the season the NYPD, the FDNY, et cetera. And all these years later, I think Major League Baseball now profits off of it. Or hopefully they donate it to charity. I'm sure they do. But now that once-a-year tradition is that the Mets, and I think the Yankees as well, wear the officially MOP licensed FDNY, NYPD hats. They weren't doing it at the time. I think this was simply the Mets saying, we're going to wear them. And they did. And when you think of the 2001 Mets and their late push in September and some of the great victories, and yes, even some of the bad losses, you do think of our heroes, our baseball heroes, that is, wearing those hats. So it was a good reminder from Howie about what was going on. This was a weird game because Chen pitched well, as we talked about. Marquis pitched well. The only run Chen gave up, the run I talked about on the RBI in which Mike Piazza, actually not RBI because Mike Piazza played the ball, the relay throw to the plate, which gave Atlanta the lead. The Mets came back and tied it. Piazza had a rip double, his second double of the game. Ventura singled, but he was unable to score. And then Tsuyoshi Shinjo, the answer to a very famous Met trivia question, the last Met to wear number 5 before David Wright hit a sacrifice fly to right field. And then, and this was a very underrated play in this game, it's 1-1, bottom of the 4th inning, second and third, 2 outs, Jay Payton at the plate. And Payton hits a ground ball down the third base slide, and Ken Caminetti, who's known for many other things besides his great defense, though he was an excellent defender, MVP, switch hitter, great resume, but unfortunately, he's known for passing way too early, the steroid use, really blowing the whistle, too, on the steroid use. He was the first one, or one of the first, to talk about the widespread usage in Major League Baseball. He made an unbelievable defensive play. If you didn't watch the Rico Rewatchable, what I would advise you to do, and I think we have the link in our description to rewatch this game, but the Mets published it a few years ago, so it's in great condition. If you go to the conclusion of the bottom of the 4th inning, and there's a score bug up there, so the game is not old enough where there's no score bugs, thank God. I love the score bug, greatest invention in sports. Ken Caminetti makes as good of a play at third base as you'll ever see. And the Mets were about to take the lead. They're about to go up 2-1. But Caminetti makes that play. But as this game is going on, this pitcher's duel between two guys that you would not expect a pitcher's duel from, it did feel like a sleepwalking kind of game and an odd game in which the crowd was, emotional to start, very loud for the reasons they should be loud, like honoring the NYPD and the FDNY and all that. And then it would get very, very quiet. Here's Howie Rose describing the oddities of the crowd and how quiet in the middle of this game Shea Stadium started to sound.
It's interesting, Ralph, as emotional as the crowd was during the ceremonies and during the first inning, things have quieted down quite a bit.
Unusual for a Shea Stadium crowd.
1 ball, no strikes, particularly with the Braves here, particularly with this game having such significance relative to the pennant race. Well, circumstances have dictated that people are reacting at their own pace.
Yeah, I think it goes back to not really knowing how to react because you want to win. It's a pennant race. You're excited. But then, 5 seconds later, your thoughts go back to what's happened in our city and the friends that we may have lost. So it was a good description by Howie Rose. And it certainly felt that way listening to the changes in the crowd because it would go from eerily silent. And then when the Mets would put a rally together, like that rally I talked about in the bottom of the 4th inning, Piazza doubles, all that, you would hear the electricity. You would hear the excitement. You would hear that raucous energy of a pennant race game. So you did see it going back and forth. A few aspects of baseball in 01 compared to baseball now that just jump out at you. Obviously, the pitcher hitting. Obviously, no mentions of pitch counts, or at least not a lot of mentions of pitch counts, and both starting pitchers going deep into the game. Marquis went 6, probably could have gone more, but he got a double play to end the 6th inning in which Todd Zeile hit a comebacker off of him, and it looked like Marquis was banged up, so who knows? He may have come out for the 7th inning. But also, the amount of guys on each bench. Remember, the rosters had expanded at this point, 40-man rosters. And one of the great rule changes that baseball made is that rosters now expand to 28 as opposed to 40. And so you see Bobby Cox going so deep into his bench with pinch runners. Ken Caminetti came out of this game, which I was stunned by. Ken Caminetti draws a walk in the 8th inning. He comes out. I understand you want speed, but you also want defense. And you had just taken the lead, and you're taking him out of the game, which didn't make a lot of sense because I would put a premium on how good defensively he still was at that point. But the amount of guys coming off the bench, obviously a big change for me with the scorecard, brought me back about 7 years, pitcher hitting and all that. That certainly jumped out at me. The other thing was the managerial decision by Bobby Valentine. So it's a 1-1 game. Bruce Chen is done after 7 innings. He gets pinch hit for by Mark Johnson and then Joe McEwing, another oddity where a pitcher gets taken out after facing 2 batters and Steve Reed, and then Mike Remlinger, the former Met, comes in, and Bobby Valentine's able to counter his left-handed pinch hitter with a right-handed pinch hitter. Back then, no 3-batter minimum. So you're seeing so many differences from the modern game jump out at you. There was another one where there was a stolen base, and Edgardo Alfonso was very, very upset because he thought that the runner was out. And, nowadays we challenge it. But instead, it's just Edgardo Alfonso screaming and yelling and too bad. And my knee-jerk reaction was to wait and not write down the stolen base because I'm waiting for the challenge. So those things always jump out at you when you watch an old game. But back to Bobby's managing. So we have a 1-1 game. Johnny Franco comes in. At this moment, John Franco is the setup man for Armando Benitez. And Johnny Franco comes in, immediately strikes out old friend Bernard Gilkey, makes him look like a fool, and gets a great defensive play by Matt Lawton on a sinking line drive to right field. And there's 2 outs and nobody on in a tie game. He walks Julio Franco in front of Chipper Jones, which I know that Franco isn't the greatest matchup for Franco, but the one thing you cannot do with a 250 hitter who's barely been in the major leagues the last few years is walk them ahead of Larry Wayne Chipper Jones. Bobby keeps him in the game to give up a base hit to Chipper on a 3-0 pitch, which is something we see a lot today, maybe not as much back in 2001. And that's when Bobby Valentine pulls John Franco for Armando Benitez. Here's what's so weird about that move. That is not a move you saw in 2001. That is not a move you saw in 2000. Going to your closer, yes, at home, but your closer in the 8th inning of a tie game. That is a rare move, but you know what that is? That's a big game move. That's Bobby Valentine telling you, hey, I need this game. I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive. And our memories of Armando Benitez are not good. We think of him blowing a lot of big games. Probably the 2000 World Series jumps out the most. Here is your forgotten treasure from this game. 1-1, 8th inning, tie game. Benitez comes in against Brian Jordan, who, from a sports perspective, we hate. Not real life. He's a wonderful guy. That's a guy we should book for the Killer Series. Oh, my God. What a killer he was to the Mets. The first pitch, not the second pitch, not a 2-2 pitch, the first effing pitch to Brian Jordan, he rips a base hit to left center field to give Atlanta the lead. And it's as if we wanted to boo Armando Benitez. We wanted to curse him out. But hey, this is a moment in time, 10 days after 9/11, where, if you recall, we didn't honk at each other on the roads. There were no political parties. We didn't hate each other. We weren't owning the other side. Everybody loved each other. And so, listening to that game through the TV, I didn't hear a lot of boos for Armando Benitez. And then what does he do? He walks Dave Martinez. That's right. Future World Series manager Davey Martinez. He walks him to load the bases up for Andrew Jones. And so, very underrated moment in this game, down 2-1 in the 8th. Armando Benitez had a chance to just set this game on fire and really throw it away. And he got lucky. Andrew Jones swung at the first pitch, flied out to center field. Okay, it's a 1-run game going into the bottom of the 8th inning, which, of course, sets up the moment. Now, let's go back to this moment, because we all remember the Mike Piazza home run. But as always, it's always set up by Edgardo Alfonso. Every Mike Piazza moment. I love Mike Piazza, great all-time Met, Hall of Famer, the whole thing. Edgardo Alfonso, whether it's the 10-run inning in 2000, whether it's that or anything else, it's always about Fonzie doing the underrated thing. So with 1 out and nobody on after Matt Lawton grounds out, here's Alfonso giving you an at-bat. The 1-2 pitch was very, very close. Home plate umpire Wally Bell called it a ball. Steve Carsey was pissy about it. Alfonso draws a walk. And I wanted to go back and count the amount of pitches. I didn't do it, but I would guess it was a 9 or 10 pitch at bat. And that set up the moment. That set up the reason we're all here. The Mike Piazza home run. I'm going to give you 2 clips of this. I'm going to give you what I heard on the radio, and I'm going to give you the TV call. Let's start off with the TV call. If you did the Rico rewatchable, this is the sound of the great Howie Rose describing maybe the most famous home run now in New York history, and maybe the most famous home run in baseball history, not because of its impact on the field, not because of a team winning the World Series. I get it. Pound for pound, it's every other home run, right? It's Bill Mazeroski. It's Bobby Thompson. It's even Robin Ventura's grand slam single, right? Or Pete Alonso's home run against Milwaukee. But this is about something different, as we all know. Here is Howie Rose calling the epic post 9/11 Mike Piazza home run.
Lopez wants it away. And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza, and the Mets lead 3-2.
Take a look at this. He's got as much power as anybody. He got the arms extended. A long home run. And a curtain call. So Piazza, a two-run home run, and this place exploded. It's been waiting to explode all night. Whoa, Mike Piazza.
0-1 to Robin Ventura.
This crowd was ready. They wanted to shout and scream all night. And boy, did they get an opportunity from Mike Piazza.
Wow. They played baseball at Shea Stadium since 1964. I don't know how this game or even this season is going to turn out. But that may rank among the handful of most memorable home runs in the history of this ballpark.
Well, they had one night to forget as Ventura strikes out. And hopefully for a moment, people were able to forget. And Mike Piazza excited this crowd. They wanted to be excited tonight in the worst way. And Mike,
I wanted to give the extended cut to hear a couple of things. First of all, I've said a lot of tough things about Fran Healy over the years. I think he met the moment. I thought Howie did a brilliant job of letting the crowd kind of tell you the story, the raw excitement that he had. You could hear the buzz of that home run through the Ventura at-bat. And I don't know if that's given enough credit when we think back to it, because we always hear the call, and it's like, oh, yeah, home run, yeah. But you can hear how it continued through that entire at-bat, and Howie Rose meeting the moment and understanding it when he described, I don't know where this game is going. I don't know where this season is going, but you may have just seen or heard one of the most epic home runs in the history of this stadium. And it turned out to be true. So that's why I wanted to give you the extended cut of that call. Both Howie Rose and Fran Healy met the moment. I've heard Howie say that it may go bothered him or something, like, it was such a bomb. It was such a, it added to the call. Howie was so natural in that call. That's what made it great. It's not sometimes about what you say. It's about the emotion of the moment. And it's about just as it's occurring, being so natural about it. So yes, it was a moonshot. Yes, it was a no doubt about it, but it doesn't take anything away from that call. It was an all-time call by Howie Rose. And it wasn't just the call. It was everything that happened after that. If you were on the Amtrak like me, though, you heard the radio version. The Hall of Famer, Bob Murphy. So here it is. If you've never heard it, here's the Piazza home run as called by the great Bob Murphy with Gary Cohen by his side.
Mike Piazza cocks the bat and waits. Mets a run behind. And the pitch. High fly ball, deep to center field. It's way back. It may go, but a two-run homer for Mike Piazza. He hit it over the center field fence. His 34th home run of the year.
And every Met smiling and jumping out of the dugout to greet Piazza. The third straight game in which Piazza has homered. He hit it off the camera deck Remember, he hit one over that camera deck earlier this year. This one went about 2/3 of the way up. Another huge home run from Mike Piazza.
What a monster shot that was. A little bit to left center field. Almost, it went over about 405 feet away. And the crowd is just standing and roaring. Now the Mets have a 3-2 lead.
Piazza just took a curtain call for the crowd.
He certainly deserves that one. Robin Ventura, the batter, swinging a foul ball off to the right out of play.
Well, Mike said it the other day after he hit the home run in Pittsburgh on Tuesday night to give the Mets the lead. He said, I understand they look to me to get that big hit. Well, I'll tell you what, he has had far more than his share during this run.
For Mike, his 34th home run, never one that meant any more than that one just hit by Mike Piazza.
They met the moment, too. I mean, we have been so spoiled with great broadcasters over the years. Hearing Gary Cohen on the radio, adding color to it. The legendary Bob Murphy towards the end of his, legendary career. I think he ended it in 2003, if memory serves correct. So we're only talking a few more years left. But they both hit it, man. They both hit it. Incredible moment. But here's the caveat to all this. The game wasn't over. They needed to win a game. And they needed Armando freaking Benitez to get the last 3 outs. And even though I know the result, we all know the result, I'm sitting there in the top of the 9th inning, and I'm already looking at my scorecard. I'm like, all right, so it's Javi Lopez, pinch hitter, Keith Lockhart, top of the order. Boy, it would be very scary if Chipper Jones came up with bases loaded 2 out up by a run. I'm already doing the math on how that situation could arise. And you're also asking for Benitez, who had faced 3 batters in the 8th inning, to now face at least 3 more. So I know the result, you know the result, but I was still anxious that almost in this recreation, Armando Benitez was going to blow the game. And I also knew, I didn't know it at the time, but we know it now, that the Mets would have a couple of just absolutely brutal losses to Atlanta in the following days. Sunday afternoon against the Braves with a chance to sweep them, brutal loss. A week later in Atlanta, they'd have a few brutal losses with Brian Jordan playing the hero role. So it was going to happen. But luckily, it didn't happen on this Friday night. Of course, he gives up a leadoff hit. Of course. I mean, it can't be easy with Armando Benitez. And after striking out B.J. Surhoff, local guy, which I had forgot about till they reminded us on the broadcast, Keith Lockhart, who is entrenched in Mets Braves history because a year earlier or 2 years earlier in the Robin Ventura Grand Slam single game, he was the one who ripped the triple, I think, to give them the lead, or he got the hit where then Melvin Mora got the outfield assist. All I know is Keith Lockhart was involved in it. And here he was with the tying run at first base, the winning run at the plate, and luckily, Armando Benitez, in this moment, on this occasion, would actually be able to make the big pitch and make it official. The Mets are going to win this damn game.
Slowly hit, could end the ball game. There's one. Mets win. Put this one in the books. Shea Stadium has something to smile about. The Mets gain a game on the Braves.
They did. They got to within 4.5. They'd get to 3.5 the next day, a game I was at. And then Sunday, maybe on a very different Rico Brogna, where we talk about brutal losses to Atlanta, they would lose a brutal game. And so the pennant race, which became one, I mean, the Mets legitimately were in an NL East race in 2001, coming all the way back from 13.5 down to get, I think, within 2.5, may have been the closest they got, 3.5, something of that nature. Unfortunately, they would blow opportunities against Atlanta, not make the postseason. And that was it. We didn't get the Subway Series rematch, I guess we were all dreaming about at the time of this. One thing I had never heard, though, until doing this rewatchable, is that after the game, Mike Piazza was interviewed by Matt Laughlin. Nowadays, when guys are interviewed, it's all over the stadium, right? They put it on the PA system. We all hear it. In this case, this was just for the TV audience. I wanted to play the whole thing because I don't know how many people have ever heard it. And it's interesting to hear Mike in the emotions of what just happened and really trying to fully understand what just happened. So here it is, uncut, if you've never heard it, right after this game is over. Matt Laughlin, now the voice of the Devils, but back then was doing pre and post on FS1 for the Mets, talking to our hero, Mike Piazza, right after this epic game.
Congratulations on the home run. It has to be among the best you have ever hit.
I really don't know what to say. I'm just so happy I gave something these people cheer. We all did. I mean, it was a great game. Both teams played incredible. It was a great game. A lot of emotion, and again, I'm just so proud to be part of this tonight. It's really cool.
Can you think long ball in that situation, or are you just thinking, let me extend the inning a little bit?
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to hit the ball hard. I felt good when I took the first pitch. I think that second pitch he took a little bit off, and I just stayed with it. And I had two really good swings earlier in the game. Marquis threw me a really good 3-2 breaking ball, which I kind of pulled off in the other situation. But that was I just went out and got it, hit it right on the sweet part of the bat.
And it goes into that scaffolding in center field. We'll call that the camera condo, and you've hit a couple off the roof this year.
Yeah, I hope it's covered in their union dues out there. But it's cool. I mean, that's when I'm hitting the ball out there. That's my strength. I want to stay in the middle of the field, and obviously tonight was prime in that situation.
Throughout this week, we have spoken to you, Mike, and we know the emotion that you feel, that everyone in this country, particularly in this city, feels. We saw the tears during the pregame presentation. But this seemed to be a cathartic event. I mean, there were cheers during it, too. There was almost a revival feeling at the proper moments. What did it mean all to you? What do you think about what took place here earlier?
I'm just so many emotions. I mean, it's really tough to put in perspective. All I can say is, these people are great. New York has just been so strong throughout this. The rescue workers, I mean, it feels so sad. I met some kids today who lost their fathers, got them in the clubhouse, and I don't know what to say. I mean, it's tough to put everything in perspective. All I know is just, God is with us now. You're seeing so much good in people, so much positive energy. And, as the president said last night, it's not going to be easy. And we just want to stay positive. And this is what America is all about, just coming together.
Well, we saw, of course, the players in the pregame hugging each other. I mean, you don't normally see that in this sport. Any particular words exchanged between yourself and the Braves?
I just said, I went to every one of them and I said, God bless your families, because life is so precious. Obviously, this is baseball. This isn't life or death. Everyone was just, amazingly, the Braves show great class as the organization as they are, just a tremendous class organization. And again, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just, we're just so happy that these people came out and we gave them something to cheer about.
Well, you did give them something to cheer about, and I know that the Mets don't want to trivialize the events of the last 10 days, particularly that of September 11th, but there is a sense of some powerful force, pushing this team forward. Where it ends up is anyone's guess, but for the next 14 games anyway, there seems to be a sense there are some good things ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not looking too far forward. We're just going out every day and winning that day, and that's what we tried to do tonight. Again, if the season ends tomorrow, we're all winners because we didn't give up and we kept pushing, and we obviously scratched and clawed and got ourselves back in this thing. So, again, some things are out of our control, some things aren't. And what we can do every night is just give 100% on the field, and that's what we did tonight.
Mike, congratulations on a monstrous home run, and
thanks,
we'll let you get back in.
Thank you.
You could tell Mike didn't know what to say. He had said, I don't know what to say numerous times because, yes, it was a great home run. And I think in the moment, you're thinking, yeah, we won a baseball game. And I'm glad I hit a home run, and I'm glad I've hit home runs in 3 straight games. But it's very tough in that moment to say, oh, I healed a city. I have everybody smiling. I'm a hero, because I think Mike, seeing the real-life nature of what 9/11 brought to our city and speaking to kids who had lost their parents, it was almost as if you could hear in the interview Mike wanting to say, what I just did is no big deal. What I just did is cool and all, but come on, what are we talking about here? And I think as time goes by, you can look back at it differently, but in the moment, we're talking 10 days after that event. So it was interesting to hear that interview and really hear that crowd, because even behind Mike at that moment, you heard the USA chants, you heard the excitement of people. Very surreal night as the Mets beat the Atlanta Braves. You heard Matt Laughlin also talk about, we don't know what's going to happen next. Well, we now know what happened next. They won the next day, beat Greg Maddux. They then pulled within 3.5 games of first place. And that Sunday game, a part of me doesn't even want to mention the Sunday game because it was so bad. So I'll make it brief. We had a 4-1 lead in the 9th inning with 2 outs and 1 on. Brian Jordan had a home run to make it 4-3. There's still 2 outs and nobody on. And then Armando Benitez walked the guy, gave up a hit, and then gave up a game-tying hit to B.J. Surhoff. And then they'd lose in the 11th. That's what happened. It was brutal. And so it was a pennant race. It was a great comeback in terms of the way they were playing, because I think they had won like 16 out of 21, something of that nature. But it obviously fell short. A couple of other observations from this game. I want to go back to the pregame. The lineup that they had of performances was incredible. They had Diana Ross performing God Bless America. They had Mark Anthony performing the national anthem, and then Liza Minnelli doing New York, New York. Here's the thing about Liza, and I'm not a Liza Minnelli expert. I'm not a Liza Minnelli fan, but I do have one opinion about Liza Minnelli that pisses me off, and I'm going to make her feel good because it's a compliment. It is unfair that her version of New York, New York is associated with losing, and that's a Yankee thing, because Liza Minnelli, and I didn't even realize this until Howie and Fran were talking about it on the broadcast, recorded New York, New York before Sinatra did. And yet, for whatever reason, the Yankees for many years decided that the Sinatra New York, New York was the winning one, and the Liza New York was the losing one. Well, Liza performed New York, New York during the 7th inning stretch, and it was outstanding. The other thing I found out by the Mets PA announcer is that when Mark Anthony was performing the national anthem, he revealed that September 21st was the 187th anniversary of the writing of the anthem by Francis Scott Key. So who knew that? And then one last thing on a lighter note, it felt like every Met had a goatee. Robin Ventura, goatee. Todd Zeile, goatee. Mike Piazza, goatee. I don't know if it was the rally goatee. I'm not sure what it was, but it felt like that was the look of choice from the Mets in 2001. Either way, this was an emotional experience. It was fun in ways, but it's tough to not watch that Rico rewatchable and not have some tears from that day. So hopefully, whether you're a young Met fan watching it for the first time, someone my age getting to rewatch it, someone older, hopefully there was some level of appreciation and enjoyment from that Rico rewatchable. We did a Rico rewatchable much earlier in the offseason, Game 6 of the 86 World Series. You could always go back in the archives and check it out. We do appreciate you listening and downloading. We will now get to the business at hand, the 2026 New York Mets. Spring training is around the corner. The offseason is almost complete. So we got a lot of Ricos coming up for the opening week of spring training to really get you set for this baseball season. But we appreciate you listening, downloading, and subscribing. I'm sorry. Before we go, fine, get over here. This is now a tradition. Spence Roberts would like to say something on the Rico Brogna. So go ahead. What would you like to say?
Let's go Mets.
Very good. We appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Rico Brogna.
$3.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.